Well, hello there. Today, well, I guess I'm going to go over some tools, effectively. And not so much the aspects of the tools and the companies, but as much as how to appropriately select a good tool. Things that I use to determine what makes them reliable, what makes them usable, ways that I've found that other tools have been inconvenient and not so easy to use, but although good quality materials, the engineering's not the best, that kind of thing. So I've got some good tools here, and they have some negative detractors, so I'm going to talk about them a little bit and show them to you. I'm sorry today we're not really walking through the woods. I might walk through the woods a little bit as we talk. So here we go. Something I'm going to start with is these four. I'm going to talk about other tools later on in my series, but for now these will have to do. And I've got a lot to cover with these guys. Like, for instance, something I'm going to start with is these four. I'm going to talk about other tools later on in my series, but for now these will have to do. And I've got a lot to cover with these guys. Like, for instance, you see the multiplier here. The multiplier, otherwise known as the Leatherman Surge, is a good example of a tool that can go wrong very, very quickly. Now, one of the reasons why I think it's absolutely paramount to go out on a limb here with this particular brand. Now, if Leatherman wanted to be my sponsor, I would gladly accept. You know, as a tool company, they have been amazingly reliable over the past, I don't know, 30 years. And I've had one various different points in time, everything from the Leatherman multi-tool all the way up to what's now is the Leatherman Mutt, or I think, which is the rifle variant. It has tools in it that's specifically for cleaning and repairing jammed rifles. That is something that was invented and determined during the latest conflicts. Now, that all aside, let's talk about the Surge a little bit. Now, what you have is a relatively large plier, and instead of talking about the features of this, I want to talk about something that it doesn't do. When I tighten my hands on this, it barely flexes. You know, I get a little bit of give, but it's not really like torquing very hard. The other thing I like is, even though it doesn't have a spring hinge like some of the Gerbers or the SOG multi-tools, which are all good tools, just not for me, they have replaceable carbide bits. So that's something that's very important to look for. It's like, how much of this tool is replaceable? How long will it have to be before I have to replace other things? The other thing I like to point out is when this tool is closed, I can open everything. When this tool is open, none of this stuff will come open if this tool is working right. It's absolutely an ingenious lever system. There's no gears or nothing. It's all spring oriented and based on the steel. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. The pliers are strong enough to cut really, really heavy gauge wire. And when they put these pliers together, they also thought about crimping. So they put a crimper back here where you'd have really supreme leverage. And that crimper is strong enough and the right shape and size that I can crimp stuff that's like, you know, a huge gauge, like 6 or 4, you know. Gauges get bigger as they go down. Every one of these blades can be removed with a tamper-resistant screw. They're all super replaceable. This tool is easy to take apart and clean if you're just willing to do it. Most of the time I just run a swab and, you know, some graphite in there and call it a day. Very, very reliable tool, been very, very good. I've used it to strip a lot of wire, carve stuff, start fires. I used it as a stake hammer. This particular one I've had for like, I think 5 years. My wife bought it for me. I had one before that for like, I don't know. I got my first Surge in 2008, shortly before the crisis. And it was just in time for me to be homeless and on the street too. Now, that's one distinguishing feature about it. Heavy duty stainless steel is a weighty tool. You know, you pound on something, you're gonna get through. Pretty awesome, right? Detractors is it's not the most comfortable thing to keep in your hand. It's made of metal, it's got sharp edges, it's bitey, it's heavy. I mean, you could throw this through a plate glass window. It's so heavy. But that's a good thing and a bad thing. It all depends on what you want. I got the biggest tool because I like to actually do stuff with it. And I use my multiplier like it's a real tool, not a substitute tool. And that's a little difference in between me and others. Speaking of tools, there's a company called SnapOn that makes wrenches and whatnot. This is a very expensive knife. It was given to me, actually. It doesn't look like much, but when you look at the back of the knife, I haven't done any adjusting. This knife is as it is when I pulled it out of its box. The sheath on the inside, the framework that holds the whole handle together, not the handle itself, the outside red coating, or the clip, is, you know, straight. You have a little gap, and then you have a little bit larger gap on the other side here. Another good distinguishing feature about this knife is it has a fairly comfortable peg for flipping this blade out. And, I mean, boom. It's smooth every time. This is a really, really nice quality knife. It's made of really nice quality alloy. Something called 8CR13MOV. It's some sort of patented alloy that is super, super awesome. Aluminum handle. The clip is impressive. I mean, I've had this on my belt and had it like pulled off by a fencing, like barbed wire grabbed it one time, and did not bend the clip. I was very, very surprised. Only 3 screws. It's very subtly shaped. So, you know, to use a term that I don't like to use very much, for an EDC knife, that is pretty nice. You know, for me to get better than that, I'd have to spend like $100, $150 on something that I was given. It's a nice quality. I'm not necessarily a fan of Snap-on tools, but that little pocket knife's pretty good. Now let's talk some common ground. Most people don't have $200 to spend on a pocket knife. The 2 knives I have here are actually priced lower than they should be sold for. This one's sold for about 40 bucks, and this one's sold for about 35. This is the Spyderco. This is their largest model that they sell as a folder. It's got its distinguished features of its stainless steel blade or Augh 8 blade, depending on what it is. The hole for the thumb, which makes for good rotation, easy to open. Thumb press, slightly curved handle with the indexing, so you know your hand gets stopped. So if you hit something really hard with this knife, or you're carving with this knife, your hand doesn't come off into the blade and it cuts you to shreds, and it will cut you to shreds. This is actually one of the detractors, I would say, of Spyderco, even though they're a nice company, because their cheap knives are like 80 bucks. You know, they're 85 generally, before Walmart got a hold to them. And now they're like 35. You look at the inside of the knife with it open, and you look at the edge, and you don't have the same quality of tolerances that I have with a Snap-on. Like, you look here, you can definitely tell that they're different qualities. One's made a little bit cheaper so it can reach a more open market. You know, we're 3 screws, super, super heavy clip, very nice G10, very grippy scales. I did what I call the blood and guts test, and this is going to sound disgusting, but you got to be able to hold on to a knife when it's slimy, especially if you're cleaning a critter. So the idea is you take the knife, you cover it in honey syrup and chocolate, or oil and chocolate, and you pick the knife up and you try and use it like you normally would. Like, whittle a stick, shave all the bark off, carve something, do something that requires you to put some pressure on that blade. See if your hand slips. See if it slips while you got a glove on. Good test. All of these knives pass that test. Even the one with the aluminum handle. Has everything to do with shape and design. This is another one that's not necessarily intense quality, but it's put together a little bit better. This is known as an Ontario River company. They don't generally make pocket folders. Most of the time, they make, you know, kitchen knives. You've probably seen them before. The blades are Ontario company, and then the handles are made by a company called Hickory. Yeah, Old Hickory. So, really, really good blade. Really, really not necessarily durable blade, but carries an incredible edge. I can take finely smoked fish and slice super thin, translucent slices with this blade. It's got great indexing. It's a great fillet and gut knife. It's a great utility knife. And more importantly, it's comfortable. Like with the indexing here, this finger weld, and look at that, your hand's going nowhere. I don't even have to index my finger all the way out here to control the knife. You know, I can have it down here. The thumb studs are not necessarily pleasant. I prefer the round hole, the Spyderco. It's got mounts on all sides. G10 scaling, once again. Super grippy. Your hands are not going anywhere. The Augh 8 steel is a very unique steel. It came out in the early 90s, maybe late 80s. And it was patented in Japan originally. Spyderco used it a lot, and I liked it because it was a very, very hard steel. The only problem with it was it's also a very brittle steel. Or they were fixing a little bit of the steel to the edge and then the rest of the knife was soft. I don't know which. But that was what went down with Spyderco back in the day. They stopped using it and changed the type of stuff that they were using, and they're using a lot more of W2 and a couple of other different steels to give themselves a strong steel that can take impact and still hold an edge. These knives hold an edge relatively well, but they don't compete with steel very well. The only knife that really competes against other steel is probably this. I've driven it through an old trunk lid at one point to make a hole so I could pop the lock and salvage what was in the trunk. This is in a junkyard. And I didn't think nothing of it at the time until I tried to do it with another knife. And then I realized how hardcore this little Snap-on is. Not all knives are created equal from the same company. I have bought Gerber knives that outshine all of these knives together, and they've been excellent. But the Gerbers that are made today are just cruddy, haphazard, all about profit. So those are a couple of things to think about when looking at tools. How they're put together, the materials they're made out of, how they flex and handle, carve, what needs to be replaced on them, and can it be replaced? Like that file right there. That file is replaceable in that Leatherman. You can use a standard jigsaw blade in that fixture there. It's got bits here. The screwdriver bits that make it indispensable. Little screwdriver bits that make it indispensable. Pry tools and regular screwdrivers and so many uses. And then there's an expansion kits that come on them that attach to your pouch. I get more bits. I get security lugs. I get all sorts of stuff that make this knife so worth it. See, I don't like to show poor examples. Fortunately, I guess. You remember me talking about that Felco saw. I've used one of those on and off over the years for, you know, got to be going on 35 years since I was in Cub Scouts. Yeah, 35 years. Pinewood Derby, I won one. Or was it the Klondike Derby? I don't remember. But anyway, with this, you've got that. You know, there are other companies that I swear by. Like, for the longest time, I had a triage cooler that people used to transport organs on. And it was a great 10-hour cooler. Kept ice really good and kept everything super fresh. It did have to, right? Organs are being transplanted in it. Well, then I found another company a little while ago called Orca. They're competitively as good as Pelican. Tell you that they're any better. I like the straps. They appear to be more bear resistant. That's the thing right now, is to make hiking apparel more bear resistant so they're not getting the food. It's lockable. Everything on it seems replaceable. and redoable. The handles are strong, and it floats. So all of those things make a big positive in a degree of what kind of thing it is. Let's see. Trying to think of something else to show you guys to give you an idea of how broad of a genre. You know, I talk about companies that let us down, like Gerber, but they're not still letting us down. I talked about the little Gerber clutch, which is probably the only Gerber tool that I still have, and I still trust. That little tool there, for what it is for, as a multiplier, it can't do the stuff on my big plier. But the fact that it has so many options ready, that it's safe to use, none of this stuff really is accessible when you've got it open. And yet it's easy to close and easy to open, and it takes up a small profile in your pocket. You could probably walk around, like if you have a pretty uncomplicated life and you live in the city and you just need a little tool to get you by, these two right here, this little SnapOn and this little Gerber clutch, if you can find it, because there's some of the modern ones aren't so good. You can find it. These guys are pretty awesome. Let's see here. What does it say on the back here? Nail file. See, they even go as far as to show you what things are when you are not necessarily as certain. These tools are actually very incredible for our generation. People have talked for years about the perfect multi-tool. There's a contest right now going on to actually, you know, improve the Halligan bar or find something that is as impressive as the Halligan bar. And it's a multitude of money. So any of you that are engineering and out there, the bladesmiths and whatnot, go out and make a knife. Make a really good quality knife. Submit it, you know? Go out there and find a way to make a better Halligan bar. Like for instance, when I was a little kid, the only stoves that you could find were the Whisper lights that are made by MSR. Except then, they were not made by MSR. They were made by another company. Being that they were made by that other company and then sold and whatnot, the company preserved the stove. What came out later was another company that was pretty famous for taking equipment to elevations that is insane. Say like Mount St. Helens, K2, Patagonia. The company was called Everest. Primus Everest. And I've got this camp stove called the Ascent. I've had a camp stove forever, and I had one before that for 5 years. It took someone running it over with a truck to kill it. I managed to bend it back into shape so many times, and it managed to work so well that it was worth it. But yet, on the other hand, you come to things like this Bear Grylls kit. This kit, the only thing in this kit that is actually from this kit is the Gerber clutch. That's it. The rest of it sucks. The waterproof zipper doesn't work the way it's supposed to. The other stuff in it was pretty low quality. I replaced it or upgraded it, and that was that. The whistles are good. That's about it, really. So things that have their detractors. Look at them greatly. Don't really look at things like brand name. I have bought Benchmades that have disappointed me. I have bought old timers that have surprised the hell out of me and been the best knives I've had that season. It really, really comes down to how well do you check out your tool. Name brands have a good way of letting you know what you're going to get, but the real truth behind it is that it comes down to the knife. Check the knife out first. Don't hold the name brand against it. If you pick it up and it's lousy, then it's lousy, you know? I had a friend that swore by Gerber paratrooper knives, and he went to defend himself and broke the handle off. You know, plastic handle. This is a paratrooper knife. Why are you breaking the handle in it? It's supposed to be able to fight and do all sorts of stuff. It's ridiculous. Also, the other thing to look at is what is the maintenance that's required with the various different tools. How many different jobs does it fill? You know, multi-tool's nice because it's got multiple tools. It fills a lot of jobs. But what about normal mundane things? Like, what about that? Is that a tool? Ask yourself, can it be trusted to be a tool? Does it require maintenance? Does it have multiple different jobs other than making you look cool? You know, what about that? Is that a tool? Yeah, you probably know exactly what that is. Maybe, I don't know. But I will tell you that there are various different versions of it. And this version I like the most because you can just put it in your pocket. Takes up very little space. And it works on large knives, machetes, axes. And it's easy to clean. I've had it for almost a decade. And yeah, you know, it maintains all my knives rather well. So with that, you know, food for thought, I guess. The next thing is okay, if the tool is not that hard to maintenance and it has multiple jobs and whatnot, think about weight and what you're doing. I mentioned earlier, these are, you know, the clutch and the SnapOn here is a nice everyday carry because they're small and convenient and they have multiple different uses and they're very good quality for the type of device that they are. I don't exactly know where to go from there with this, other than to point out, be scrutinizing. It's always not about the name brand, it's about what it does. There are a lot of tools out there that people have forgotten. There are a lot of tools out there that people are currently discovering. Figure out what works best for your kit. Put your head on a swivel, start looking for it and try them out. Don't be afraid to spend a little bit of money. You know, sometimes top quality is what's required. Other times, you can get by with generic. Sometimes generic is better than top quality. Just, you know, some sort of rarity. Made by the miracle of science and the magic of fate or something. Well, with all those notions together, and the ideas that I've given you, and with what all of this stuff does, I would say put together your own list. Build your own little kit. You know, your knives, your fire kits, your water filtration, how to build them and have the tools around to do them so when you go out, you have the ability to do so. And with all of that, have fun. Enjoy the woods.